All right, we're here with more quarantine theater as we're checking out the 2006 NCAA tournament, Murray State, North Carolina, and joining us, freshman on that Murray State team, now an assistant coach at Belmont, Tyler Holloway, joining us. Tyler, what do you remember about Dayton, Ohio, from St. Patrick's Day of 2006?
You know, it's been a while, obviously, since all that happened. I don't remember a whole lot, so obviously watching this video will kind of bring back some good memories and whatnot. I do remember being in the same hotel as Davidson, so Steph Curry walking by, and obviously that's kind of when he had started, becoming a sensation and whatnot. And I believe this may have been the year that they made the deep run. Maybe it was the year after. So I remember that, and then I'll never forget the moment running out of the tunnel. Obviously, just first time being on that floor, and kind of a childhood dream coming to fruition. So those things, and then obviously some of the things that happened during the game. So I'm excited to kind of, take a walk down memory lane here with you.
You're a freshman in the NCAA tournament. I know it's probably and unfortunately, you never got back again as a player. But it's probably like, man, I can get used to this, right out of the jump, getting to go to the dance.
It's obviously a big reason why I chose to come to Murray. So to experience that in our first year was definitely a dream come true. And it is. That's what you think, man. Check the box in the first year, and obviously you don't assume you'll make it back, but obviously, knowing at that point what we had returning and then the recruiting class that we had coming in, it was definitely an expectation that was going to be, somewhere that we would be for the next 3 years afterwards.
George Mason had won in the game because you guys are playing, if I recall correctly, you're the last game of the night. It was kind of a late start, and George Mason, who ultimately ended up in the Final Four, beat Michigan State in the game before. Do you remember any sort of, like, even having any idea that that's going on, or are you guys just so locked into getting ready for Carolina you don't even really notice there's another game going?
It's interesting you brought that up. That is the other thing that I do remember. Our locker room was basically right next to George Mason's. So, after Coach Cronin had addressed the team, we were kind of out there seeing the ending of that game and seeing them knock off Michigan State. And I remember we kind of had to step to the side as George Mason was coming back to their locker room. And with us obviously both being mid-majors, and they had just, done what obviously we were hoping to do against Carolina, I remember them coming running back, and we almost kind of all started celebrating together in a sense. And we knew nobody on that team or anything, but, they were telling us, hey, we just did it. It's your turn, go get it done. So I do remember that moment being a really cool moment before we obviously went out and took the floor against Carolina. It just kind of gave us some extra confidence, motivation to hopefully go out and do the same thing.
You see that number that just popped up there, that 10 straight losses in the tournament at that point, the only win coming in 88. And obviously you hadn't played on any of those 10 teams, but was that something that you remember being a talking point, or something that was just – burden's too strong of a word, but just like man, it'd be nice to finally get one, or was it just we're just kind of locked in on what we're doing?
Sorry, Jeff, the first part of your question kind of cut out. What was the first part?
It said that 10 straight losses with the tournament for Murray at that point, and was that a talking point that you remember sort of in the locker room of, hey man, it's been a while since we've gotten one, or is it we weren't on those teams, we don't really care?
Yeah, I don't remember it being a talking point. Obviously, I think it's something that, when you're in that situation, every player knows those type things. Obviously, if you've, followed Murray State basketball at all, that that's something that we obviously wanted to take that next step. And I think we had such a, senior-heavy team that, we went in expecting to take that next step. We were not just satisfied that year with just being there. We were a confident group. We were playing well at that time. So I don't remember it being necessarily an emphasis in the locker room, but I do remember, Coach Cronin just saying, hey, you've earned the right to be here, and you're supposed to be here, and there should be no expectation less than going out and winning this game and advancing to the next round. So there was definitely a confidence that was looming within our team, and we were excited to go out and expected to win that game. And I do remember Carolina being a young team. I know that they had some senior guys. I think Wes Miller and Noel, I believe, was on that team. But for the most part, I think it was a some guys were younger. I know Tyler Hansborough was a freshman on that team. So we kind of felt like we had, the experience box checked on them, and we were excited to go out and compete against them.
Yeah, I mean, they were the defending national champs and had lost everybody. They said they had 9% of their scoring was back, and Hansborough was obviously a big piece there as a freshman. But when you see it's North Carolina, that you're playing, and it's obviously one of the blue bloods, but at the same time, it's not yes, they're the defending champs, but no, it's not a vintage Carolina team. I know Mick's pumping you up, but are you guys? Is there any stage fright at all? Looking down the floor and seeing the Carolina blue?
I mean, I think there's always a little bit of that. You just look at, obviously the stakes are high with being an NCAA tournament. It was, obviously my first time. I can't remember who all on our team had played in it prior, because obviously I know guys like Keith Jennifer, Trey Pearson had transferred in. I cannot remember if they were on there or had made it prior, but there's always a little bit of that. Obviously, the North Carolina history and the tradition there. Obviously, the Last Dance recently coming out, so you see all the things with Michael Jordan on there, and so that's definitely in your mind. But I think a lot of that does go away once the ball is tipped up. Even still to this day, and in coaching, I think kind of living vicariously through the guys now that nerves are natural, nerves are supposed to be there. It just totally means that it means a lot to you and that you care about it. But I think there was definitely some, we knew that we had some, senior guys, and they were young, and like you had said, only returned 9% of their scoring. So I think definitely more of an excitement level and more of a confidence level than there was with anything with that team.
How'd you get to Murray? How'd that recruiting process go with I remember when Mick signed you that he said, he's like, I think we're getting a Travis Diener type who was at Marquette before, and just a guy that was just going to walking into the gym, may not put the fear of God into you, but was going to kill you when it was all said and done. But how'd that recruiting process go?
Yeah, so summer going into my senior year, really my only two schools that had reached out were Birmingham Southern and UAH. UAH was a Division II school there right near my hometown. So kind of only had, Alabama schools that knew of me and things like that. I played for the Alabama Lasers that summer going into my senior year, and we played in a couple big-time tournaments, and we played in the Peach Jam, which for anybody on the recruiting circuit knows that's the EYBL, Nike team that, that tournament is a really, really popular event for college coaches. And so that was kind of my, quote unquote, one shining moment, I guess. I had a really, really good tournament and ended up with, 12 or 15 Division I offers from that tournament alone. So that kind of is where it all stemmed from. I remember Coach Cronin telling me that he was at our court, not even there to see me. And I guess it was a game where I just started kind of banging in a lot of threes and made a lot of plays. And, that's what got me on Murray's radar. And, prior to Coach Cronin reaching out, I didn't know where Murray was. Didn't know anything about it. Didn't know anything about Murray, Kentucky. So I am still very thankful and blessed that, he happened to be watching someone else on the court that I was playing on, and he happened to, see me running around making a few plays. That's kind of where the ball got rolling with my recruitment with Murray.
It's funny how that happens. We heard a lot with that. That was the same story with the John Morant. You're not there to see John Morant. Yeah. Suddenly you stumble into some kids sometimes.
Totally. It happens that way sometimes. Obviously, I'm nowhere near the level of John Morant, but, glad that it worked out that way for me as well. Similar situation.
You're both on the 1,000-point scoring list at Murray, so you got that going for you.
No doubt.
So, well, there you go. Finally got one on the board. I think that's Justin Orr finally scoring. I mean, when you're just sitting on the bench at that point, and you guys, you've scored 2 points through the first 5 minutes until Orr scores there. I mean, is it? You look up, you're only down 6, but. You guys, is there any nerves? I mean, you played Cincinnati early in the year, and took them to overtime. Probably should have beat them in the end. And so it's not like it was the first time playing a big time team. But when you don't get off to sort of that great start, what's the conversation like over on the bench?
Well, obviously you always want to get out to a quick start, but I think a lot of times you see in these type games where maybe teams are just kind of filling their way in. There's obviously still those nerves. So normally that first media timeout, it can kind of go a lot of different directions. So I think it was a little bit of us just settling in. North Carolina always poses a unique problem because of their style of play and their tempo. I remember kind of coming into this game, us doing some things on the floor practice-wise where we were having, 6 and 7 offensive players out there to try to emulate their transition style and how quickly they're going to play and things like that. But like anything, I mean, you've heard football coaches talk about playing against the up-tempo style. You can't simulate it until you get into the game. And then you just kind of, as a player, have to adjust to that and, figure out ways to kind of get around that. So I think it's almost maybe a little bit more of that when you're playing a team like this. Or it could have been, when Shaka was at VCU, can't emulate his press, no matter how many guys you try to put out there and, make it realistic, it's hard to do. So, I think as you probably see here, we kind of start settling in more as the game goes on. And that's just solely because of their style. I mean, you see right there, they score within about 6 seconds of the game. Or of the shot clock. So more so than that than anything.
And Mick is unhappy, and he points to the bench and says, Holloway, get in there. So, I mean, it's got to be – I mean, everything else aside, you got to be sitting there going, man, I'm checking into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it all happens so quick. I do remember having nerves. I mean, obviously I'm a, probably, 16, 17-year-old kid here checking into something that I've watched my whole life. So, I do remember having nerves, but, you've tried to put in the work in the week prior and be totally locked in on film and things like that. So that kind of fear goes away. It's more nerves, but it's not fear. So I remember being ready to play, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some serious nerves but I don't even remember him saying going into the game, so it was weird seeing him just turn around and kind of almost jerk me in right there and send me into the game. But I was definitely ready. I feel like individually I had put in the time, and as a team we were ready to play. So there was definitely a confidence level for sure. I do remember them coming off, running and trapping, and me flashing to the ball. So this is kind of bringing back some good memories here.
Sean Witherspoon. And obviously he's going to play a huge role with the injury coming up here in a little bit. But I think he was the one guy that did have the experience from the Illinois game the 2 years earlier. And it really was unfortunate. Yep. Not as obviously the way this ended, but then next year he was as athletic of a kid as there was. And I still, one of my favorite moments came from, this is the old tape that's falling apart there. One of my favorite moments from his freshman year in 2004 was Southern Miss came up and somebody threw him a lob, and it was like the Grant Hill against Kansas lob where he just went, it's like, I don't know how he got that high and dunked it. And I remember that was Cronin's first year. And I think the final was like 93-53. And that was a big deal for, a Conference USA team to come up to Murray because teams didn't come up anymore to play. And I remember Mick saying that he was doing everything he could to get non-conference games with anybody. And they were calling the SEC and calling the Alabamas and Georgias and stuff. And he said after that game, nobody would call him back. They wouldn't even pick up the phone to call him because it was just a thrashing. But just how Spoon's that might have been the one for you.
that one still haunts me right there. I've got to knock that one down. No, but Spoon, he was, Spoon is who hosted me on my visit when I came to Murray. He was obviously, Mr. Murray, if you want to say, but he was just such a versatile player. He could play multiple positions. You've heard people refer to those type guys as almost like a Swiss Army knife in a sense. We always used to mess with Spoons. It seemed like he would always score the first basket of every single game that he played in. But you can see even on those last couple of possessions right there, he's, getting offensive rebounds. He's, finding open players for shots. My goodness, that was unbelievable right there. I think that was Marcus Ginyard, if I remember right. Or no, Terry. Okay. But he just always seemed to be in the right place, at the right spot at the right time, and obviously just did so much for our team. We really missed him when he went down in this game.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it was just one of those things he never really recovered from. It just robbed him of his athleticism for his senior year. Where he just playing on one foot, and you just felt sick about it. Yeah, I think that was Keith Jennifer with the getting out of the way with Rayshon Terry coming down the lane.
Yeah. We don't want to show that to Keith anytime soon. He probably tried to forget that one.
It's the one where you're
that just shows you kind of what I was alluding to earlier. I mean, just the pace that they play with. It was so quick. There's another miss right there. But you can see, I mean, if you can get them into a half-court game, which is obviously what we tried to do, you have a fighting chance. But, they want to play. They want to score within the first 8-10 seconds of the shot clock, which just makes it hard. I mean, you can't replicate that in practice, no matter how hard you try. I see obviously us last couple possessions probably a little bit had to do with me. Obviously wasn't the best defender in the world, so a little 2-3 zone here, but it slows them down too.
Sure.
It makes them eat clock, makes them play a little, make them a little uncomfortable, and get into some sets that maybe they're not used to. And so we forced a couple turnovers here, a couple bad shots. So, it's been obviously really good for us.
What was that arena like? I've never been in there, but I've just heard. I mean, obviously they do the first four there, and it's especially for the tournament, it's like one of those just places that Dayton loves their basketball and they support it, and just always heard great things about it.
It's one of the best venues in my opinion in the country. We played there in the first four last year, and then obviously playing there here in this game. I mean, the support from the community is unbelievable, and in terms of just a basketball arena, I mean, you're not going to get many better. Everybody's just right on top of you. Everybody's into the game. So even just your general community that are there, I mean, they're just there to watch a great game of basketball. And I think that's what makes it such a special venue, is that the local community supports it so well. And obviously then you've got, Murray's following is always great. So you're going to have a lot of Murray fans in there. Carolina's got a great following. So I remember it just being an unbelievable atmosphere in there, and something that, I will definitely remember for a long, long time. But it's a great place. I would play as many games in there as possible if I could. And that first four is not a bad place to be to play some games.
It's weird because you got, Mick always wanted to play fast, and you guys wanted to get up on people, but it is sort of that, because it feels like there's points where just watching it, you guys seem hurried here and maybe taking some quicker shots, because that's almost reflexively how you normally played. But against Carolina, to your point, that probably wasn't the best course of action.
There's always a fine balance, and it's hard trying to find that balance of, obviously you still want to play the style that you want to play, but you don't want to play the other team's style. And you always want to play quick, but you don't want to play fast. But obviously you can see a little bit. I feel like here, more so than anything, we seemed a little rushed offensively because of their pressure, which is another thing we're still trying to kind of, get a feel for. They've made some tough shots on the offensive end. Obviously, I forgot Danny Green was on that team. Pretty good right there. But there's also, you've heard things about, pressing a pressing team. Sometimes, you've got to play their style a little bit and hope that you're obviously apt to do that. But you don't want to get carried away with it to where you're not getting into your sets and getting, the guys you want shooting the ball in good spots. So, obviously here, this looks like a little isolation play for Trey. We get a good look off of it. So those are the things you want to do right there. But you also don't want to get into track meet either. So that's that fine balance that I kind of talk about there.
Mick's in all his glory over there. He's getting fired up.
I see Coach Grady over there going crazy too. He never sat down. That was his workout for the day over there on the bench, standing up, calling out every play. But see, things like you see right here, these are things against a team like this you can do. Get into a set that you want to get into to get the person you want to get the ball to, which obviously makes them work defensively. Maybe, something that you can, draw to towards the end of the game and kind of get them a little bit tired. So that's a great set right there. That's a great half-court possession. Use some clock. Got the ball into Big P in a deep post position, drew 2 defenders, found an open guy in Ossian, and, drew a foul on the three-point shot.
What's it like playing for Mick? What's it like playing for Mick Cronin?
I loved it. I mean, he was great. I felt like he always kind of had that pulse on the team, in terms of what needed to be, what needed to happen next. Seemed like he kind of always, made the right call or the right switch in game to what we needed to go. I remember, I believe it was our semifinal game in the OVC tournament against Jacksonville State. They were carving us up pretty good. They had a Walt D. Russell, I believe, was their point guard. I'm not sure how some of these names are coming back to me now that we're talking about it, but as I'm talking, these names are kind of coming back to me. But I remember we switched to a 1-3-1 zone that we had actually ended up using against Sanford in the finals as well, and it totally changed the course of that game and just the tempo of that game. So it just seemed like he always kind of had the right button to press and, kind of knew how to motivate guys. And obviously he did a great job with his team and has done an unbelievable job with his Cincinnati teams. And, then you look at the job he did this year with UCLA when, it looked like they were just dead in the water, and then turn it around and we're a tournament team. And, I believe he ended up winning Pac-12 Coach of the Year this year as well. So always, I don't even remember. Do you remember the play where it happened?
No, he just kind of suddenly got out of the timeout, walked back to the dressing room. So, and then he was not to be, not to return.
Definitely the turning point, no question. I mean, we just, I guess, spoke on earlier. I mean, he had so much to do with our success. And, obviously he filled up the stat sheet, but there were so many things that Spoon did that never showed on a stat sheet either, just leadership-wise and, knowing how to talk to guys and keeping our team together and all that.
Trey Pearson, and the Racers take the lead. The South Fulton, Tennessee, and went to Ole Miss, and then came up and just a streaky. That's probably the best way that you could put. Man, once he got on a roll, man, it was hard to get that snowball from rolling downhill stopped.
I agree with that. He was an assassin when he got rolling. One of the more difficult players that I still to this day have had to guard. He was just one of those guys that it was effortless to. He was just a naturally gifted scorer that when he got it going, there was just honestly nothing that you could do. So I've already seen here a couple times in these sets, we've basically just gotten him in an ISO situation and kind of let him play one-on-one, which is one of the areas he was best at.
We've seen a lot of guys over the years. It's just, a lot just in the OVC, where you're like, you get 6'10" guys come in, but they weigh 170 pounds and, and you hope that they fill out by the end, like a Tony Easley type, that you hope they physically develop as they come. But when you're playing a dude like, just a bull like Tyler Hansbrough, and obviously, one of the going to be the player of the year in the country, but Pearson Griffith was a freaking horse. I mean, it was just like that. That was not typical at that time, sort of OVC post size. What an asset on this stage to be able to let him go in there and just bang around.
You're exactly right. I mean, especially against a guy like Tyler Hansbrough, I mean, at the mid-major level, you just don't see guys, even today, you don't see a lot of guys with his size, strength at the mid-major level. You're always going to see more undersized guys, 6'7", 6'8", more kind of like bruiser type guys. So he was definitely kind of the elephant in the room in terms of just, what he brought to the table. And he made an unbelievable jump, I know, from his junior year to his senior year. I think Coach Cronin kind of knew how valuable he was going to be to the success of our team. And the improvement that he made was just astronomical and obviously had a huge role in, how good we were that year. But to be able to go up against, a high major team. I mean, he was bigger and stronger than Tyler Hansbrough at this point. We're sitting here playing North Carolina. So it was huge to be able to have that because they weren't able to just, play bully ball and just throw the ball into Hansbrough and kind of let him go one-on-one. And you can see right here, I mean, Big P kind of has him out to, 8 feet off the block versus us just getting buried. So what that does is it limits our help. It limits our rotations. So therefore it limits secondary box outs. So that played a huge role in this game and why this game was so close for so long.
Getting the deflection there, which I know are big for everybody, but that was obviously a Patinoism that Cronin really that was a real priority for you guys was deflections, right?
If I remember right, I think our number was 40 that we tried to get during games. I think when we had gotten to 40, I mean, our record was 5-6-0, 7-0. I see the jacket coming off over there now.
And he hands it to somebody. He didn't even care who it was. Just take it from me.
He might have had a jacket guy that just knew when that thing started coming off, he had to go grab it. But yeah, I mean, our record, I remember it was may have been undefeated, when we got to that number. Now, obviously, that's a high number, and you got to have a lot of activity and getting your hand on a lot of balls. But it was definitely a number that he took from Patino that was, important for us to get to.
He looks 16. It's amazing that the one thing about really all coaching at the highest levels, but there are no like overnight sensations. You don't just decide, hey, I'm 23, I'm going to go be a coach, and at 25 you're running a program. It just does. I mean, everybody pays their dues, and obviously his path was a little different, that he started younger and so on, but I think he was 30 when he got the job, maybe 29. I mean, he was on that young side, but there was no, I mean, obviously the pedigree he had and the guys that he had worked for, there was no doubt that he had a firm grasp on that program and sort of how he wanted to mold it moving forward.
For sure. I mean, I think you look at his teams he's had, obviously him being under Huggins and being under Patino. I mean, I think that style directly reflects, even to this day, his coaching style and the way his teams play. Obviously, he was a young coach. He had a lot of energy, a lot of fire. Obviously hired a good staff around him, which is always key. But a lot of guys that, get to those levels, I mean, that, you mentioned putting in their dues. I think I remember reading somewhere one time where, when Steve Lavin got the UCLA job, he was something like $100,000 in debt because he had, basically worked for free a lot of places and, slept on couches and locker rooms and everything else. And, so I know in the same way, maybe not to that extent, but Coach Cronin did the same thing to obviously get to where he was at such a young age. And you're right. You don't see that at all anymore. I think maybe you have like a Brad Stevens or a Wes Miller at UNC Greensboro or some guys like that. But it's just not something that's the norm. ADs and presidents want experience and want guys that have done it, a long time and been a lot of places. So definitely a kudos to him for, getting this position and then doing as good of a job as he did during his 3 years at Murray.
I mean, and you're a guy that's now, I mean, you've been doing this for 10 years from grad assistant and working your way up through the staff. And it's like, I'm sure there's some part of you that you're like, hey, I can do this and I want to do this and I want to be able to run a program. But I would have to imagine if I, even 3 or 4 years ago, you're 27, to be like, hey, you want to be a Division I head coach? Not do you want to be a Division I coach? Could you handle being a Division I head coach? Could you have done it at that point, or would it really have still you not maybe been under the learning tree long enough at that point?
Yeah, I think these last probably, I would say 3 years, I feel like I have taken a huge step in terms of my growth for being ready to run a program. I think, obviously, my years under Coach Bird, a lot of people ask me, why haven't you kind of jumped around and moved around? And I'm like, look, I'm getting the best basketball 101, crash course that I could get under Rick Bird and then now under Coach Alexander. And so, my time under, both of them, obviously I can speak to Coach Bird because I was with him longer so far, but I don't think I could be under a better guy in Coach Bird in terms of learning the game, learning how to run a program, learning how to do it the right way, not cutting corners, how to manage people, how to be there for people, not just in their 4 years. So, I would say that, I definitely think I'm ready. I don't know if an AD or a president would say that I am, but I'm confident enough to know that, I've been under Coach Bird for 10 years and now Coach Alexander for 1 year. And I do feel confident that I can do it. It's all about being who you are and your personality and putting in the time, and not sacrificing, anything else to get to the point you want to get to. So, I do think I'm ready. That may not now, just because I think I'm ready doesn't mean that that's going to happen anytime soon, but I'm trying to do the best I can where I am. I try to invest every day to try to become a better coach and to, in my current position, put Belmont in the best chance possible to win games and be successful on and off the floor. And, I try not to put too much emphasis on what's next or where I'm going to go. Just try to kind of be where my feet are and do the best job I can now and kind of let the rest of it take care of itself.
How would you grade the 2006 Tyler Holloway haircut?
I don't know. I wish I'd have done it. I should have just buzzed it, man. Those bangs are a little too close to the eyes right there.
Yeah. Had the Bama bangs before they were famous.
That's exactly what it was. Maybe I should take credit for those things. I think I buzzed my head at my sophomore year, but I kept the Bama bangs, I guess, because I was still, just fresh coming out of Alabama. But that's a bad-looking haircut. I'll be ashamed to show my kids that one day. It was even worse. I remember when I got my permit in high school, man, it was even worse. So that actually looks good right there compared to what it used to be.
Did Cronin, and from just watching him, I remember him sort of as an idea as opposed to like specific things. It's been so long at this point, but it seems like he's living and dying with every shot and every possession on the bench. Was he like that all the time?
He was. I mean, he was always totally locked in, possession by possession. And I think that's what makes the the best coaches the best, is that they don't take a possession off or a practice off or a walk through or a shoot around or anything like that off. And so as a result, that, totally bleeds into their players. And I think if you watch his teams, not just obviously this game we're watching here, but, his teams that were at Cincinnati and UCLA, they don't take possessions off, and, when you are, dedicated to not taking any possessions off, well, possession by possession finally adds up to a good half, a good media timeout to media timeout, and then obviously, to a good 40 minutes. So, that's why I think, and that's not just speaking on him. You look at any of the best, whether it's Nick Saban or Mike Krzyzewski or anything like that, it's what makes them so good. And I think that's what made him so good as well.
31-30, going to the locker room. What's you guys obviously feeling good walking on there, still an eternity to go, but what do you remember about the speech, if you can muster that?
Yeah, I remember feeling good going into the locker room. I mean, I sit there and, look at the offensive possessions that we had. There were so many empty possessions where we just kind of looked like, you and I had talked about, where we looked, kind of unorganized, not know what we're trying to get to, pressured out of our sets, but still to be able to take a 1-point lead with giving them some of the easy looks and offensive rebounds that they got. So, obviously we knew Spoon wasn't coming back, so we knew that, guys were going to have to step up, and I knew that my name could potentially be called. So, I don't think I got a lot of minutes here in the second half, but I remember, kind of coming in with the mindset of, look, some of our bench guys are going to be needed here because, our starting five, they can't go 20 full minutes.
Right.
So I knew that we were confident. I mean, we made a nice run there when it looked like kind of we were dead in the water there for a little bit when we had gotten down 6. But knew we were in a good spot. I mean, it's anybody's game. It's 20 minutes. It's media timeout to media timeout here, and that's where you want to be in these type games. You just want to give yourself a chance.
And you guys just can't throw it in the ocean at that point. You shot 32% in the first half, and you're ahead. I mean, it's like you got to feel like, man, we played like trash in a lot of ways, and offensively, at least defensively, you guys, you held them to 30. It's like it's kind of that. Well, all things considered, love where we're at right now.
It's kind of a somewhat of a tough situation where you're at, because it's kind of like a football team they keep moving the ball really easily against, say, a defense, but then they have to settle for field goals in the red zone. So it can somewhat hurt your confidence a little bit that, hey, we're up one, but man, we're only, we're shooting 32%. So we can really have a lot of space here to kind of extend this thing out if we can start, converting on the other end. But then at the same time, you're like, well, I mean, is it them that's doing this to us? And that's why we're not converting on the other end. And so a little bit of a fine balance there. But I think you have to have confidence. Like, look, we can play a lot better here. We can convert much better on the offensive end. We're obviously defending them at a very good rate. I don't know what their fast break points were here at half, but nothing extravagant by any means.
This would obviously be Mick Cronin's last game as head coach. And from sort of the stories over the years that we've heard, I mean, essentially, athletic director Alan Ward, the game ended, 90 seconds after the game was over, and he was in the hallway outside the locker room, and his phone rang, and it was Cincinnati calling to, get permission to talk to Mick. Just as players, because I don't think, after the first year, after, they go win the tournament his first year and lose that he had been linked to, I think it was South Florida, his name was getting thrown around, and it was like, he was young, he was hot, he had won right away, he wasn't going to be in Murray forever, and everybody seemed to know that. But as players, as the season wound down and you guys win again, win the OVC tournament, and there's a lot of time between winning in Nashville and then finally getting to Dayton. So I'm sure you guys hear chatter and so on. But when do you start to sort of get the idea and the sense that he's not going to be here next year?
I really, I can't comment obviously on all of our guys, but as the season was going on and even after we won the tournament, I don't ever remember really thinking that as a possibility. And I don't know if because as a player you just get lost in the process of the work and preparing for the next practice, watching the next set of film for the game, trying to do our best to make sure we were ready physically and mentally for this game. So I probably would say really until after the game when we got back to Murray and then kind of started sinking in like, man, coach has obviously won it his first year. We just won again, had a serious possibility to win this game. That's probably when the first thought crept into my mind that I can remember. But you just get so lost in the team and the guys you're around and, listen to what your coaches have to say every day. And so you don't really, at least I didn't think about it as the year was going on. And, even making my decision to come to Murray, it was never something that entered my mind. And I don't know if at that time that was, because I didn't have a clue or because I made my decision based on, more than just the coach.
Right.
Even though Coach Cronin was a big reason why I chose to come there, but, there was, that's what you have to make your decision based on more than just one or two factors. It's got to be a kind of an overall fit and a perfect fit for you. So it was never something that kind of weighed on me in terms of my mind, but obviously it does set in pretty quickly, and then you start seeing things and, reading things and things like that. I think the one benefit we had, social media wasn't the way it is now then. Ooh. That was a big one right there by Big P. So I think social media kind of allowed us not to be able to see it as much as it does kids say nowadays.
Sure.
If that phone call happens with Alan Ward, it's on Twitter, 2 seconds after the fact.
Right.
So that probably helped a little bit us, just kind of being out of the loop, I guess.
When the trigger's finally pulled and he leaves, does he have a chance to talk to you guys, or is it just a text message, or how did that go down?
I do remember it all happened so fast. I believe I was at home in Alabama because I think after this game, I think our spring break at Murray was the following week, if I remember right. And so I remember being at home, and I believe Coach Savino, who was an assistant on our staff, I believe he's the one that called me and said, hey, this is about to happen, or, serious possibility is going to happen. Cincinnati's reached out. There's some talks going on. And then I don't remember if Coach Cronin directly reached out. I don't remember that. but I just remember, you just kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of things that go through your head right away. Like, man, what does that mean for me? I mean, what's next? So, but I remember being at home, and then obviously I remember, calling teammates and teammates reaching out and things like that. And then your first thought is just like, well, what about our recruiting class? And what about guys coming back? I mean, there's a lot of thoughts that go through your head right away.
What was your first impression of Billy Kennedy?
Coach Kennedy was he was definitely on the opposite end of the spectrum of Coach Cronin in terms of just being more soft spoken and a different style. But I think my greatest thing that I learned from Coach Kennedy was just the type man he was, what he valued, very big Christian, that, what we learned off the floor was just as important to him as it was on the floor. And now from a coach, from me being an aspiring head coach, I think the neatest thing to look back is to see that two totally different styles could still be very, very successful. Mm-hmm. Obviously he was a very much a defensive minded coach. That just kind of, sat around, didn't have that, say, fiery attitude that you and I were just alluding to with Coach Cronin. There weren't very many jacket throws or anything like that with Coach Kennedy. But, my time with him was great. There was definitely a transition period, which there always is when a new coach comes in that didn't recruit you. But I look back now and just the lessons that I learned from him, both as a man and the things, from a coaching standpoint, is something that I still carry with me today. And I'm, so thankful that I got to play for him for 3 years. And then obviously having Coach Prohm as an assistant there under him as well, it's pretty neat just to see the success for all the people that were under him. Coach May, who's now a head coach, and Amir, that's now a head coach. So it's amazing. And I think speaks volumes to who Coach Kennedy is, that his coaching tree looks like that now.
I remember B.J. Jenkins saying that he said, man, if Billy yells at you, you feel bad that you've made him mad, because he's like, he never got that hot, It was just, his presentation was always different, but boy, it was like when he did get wound up, it was like, oh, I did that.
That's so true. And there wasn't many situations that I can remember where he got wound up in that way. But definitely you knew it. I mean, when his voice raised, I mean, it was something you knew you had really messed up, and you need to get that fixed right away. But I think that's, so neat that, that's who he is. Him being a head coach didn't change who he was or anything like that. And I think that's kind of what I was telling you earlier when you asked me about becoming a head coach. I mean, it's all about who you are, not changing who you are to try to fit something that you're not. And so, I greatly value that Coach Kennedy, went about his work that way. And obviously that's why he, was successful at Texas A&M, and he's been successful everywhere he's been. Because his values and his morals and what he's about has never wavered and never changed throughout every job that he's had.
Lead got to 4 there for a second. The biggest of the game at that point. When does the transition happen from we hope to win, we believe we can win, to we could win? Like this is happening.
I think that really happened going into the locker room. I mean, you kind of have a reset button at halftime, but it's anybody's game now. It is a possession by possession, and it's going to totally come down to who executes more, who makes one more play, and that's all it's going to be now. I mean, you can throw any of the fear, the nerves, all of that goes out the window now. I mean, this is going to come down to the wire. It's going to, it takes one run, to kind of change this game around. But there's no doubt that, we have the belief right now that we are, not only are we in this game to win it, but we are going to win this game. This is where, kind of like I alluded to earlier, we had so much experience on this team, and this is where this is going to be totally in our favor, because this is a Carolina team that, there were some guys on that championship team last year, but I mean, they had 2 and 3 freshmen on the floor sometimes. So, a lot of those guys had never been there either. So just because North Carolina was on their chest, didn't mean a dang thing at this point. It could have had, North Carolina College of Pharmacy on their chest right now. It wouldn't have mattered, So there's no question that I think going into halftime and then now it's, we're winning this game, no doubt.
And Hansbrough's just he was so raw at this point. He kind of was. It seemed like he was like that a lot of his career, where it was just the bull in the china shop. But it's like the bottom line was when he got the ball a foot from the basket, you were done.
Well, it's what you couldn't allow happen, and that's what was, we kind of talked earlier with Big P. I mean, that's what was so great about so much of this game that we've watched so far is that, Big P's strength and size allowed him not to get deep post position because you're exactly right. I mean, if he catches it, he wasn't the most skilled guy back to the basket. So if you could push him off the block and make him make a one-on-one move, you're going to have a decent chance to have success. But the deeper he caught the ball, and that's with any post player, we were in serious trouble. The unique thing about Hansbrough is that Alabama Lasers team that I talked about earlier that I played on, we had a top 5 power forward in the country, Richard Hendricks, that ended up choosing to go to Alabama to play. And Richard was the number 1 power forward in my class, and Tyler Hansbrough was the number 2. So that summer going into my senior year, they paired us together against his team out of St. Louis. I think he was on the St. Louis Eagles. So we played them probably 5 or 6 times that summer. So I had seen him a lot that summer going into my senior year on the AAU circuit. So I kind of felt like I already knew the way he played and his tendencies and things like that because they always wanted to see those guys go up against one another. But just had to do our best to kind of, keep him away from the basket and make him make one-on-one moves versus just being able to turn around and lay the ball in the hoop.
Talk to me about Justin Orr, a guy that, was one of the bigger offensive threats and on command, knocks down a 3 right there. I know he left after here and ended up at my alma mater at the Ohio University, but was a kid that felt like there was a lot left in the tank. Certainly, felt like he could have been one of those another 1,000-point scorer, a guy that was really going to be part of the foundation of this team if he had stuck around.
Totally agree. Couldn't agree more there. I think Justin had kind of only scratched the surface of what he was going to become. And, I mean, you've seen him make a lot of good plays in this game alone. I mean, just stepping up there when UNC tried to go zone and kind of, change the tempo of the game there, and he steps up and makes a 3. So, he was one of my favorite players, that I played with. He was just such a free spirit. I can always remember him doing this little – I don't even know what it was. It's like bird, imitation before games when we were kind of walking out to, to play games, just to kind of lighten the mood. That's just kind of who he was. He never really got uptight, very laid back personality. And I think you have to have personalities like that on any team because I think, you're always going to have different personalities. I was kind of more of the serious guy that was very much locked in, but he also would calm me down a little bit, and give me a couple laughs before the game with his little bird imitation, which you'd have to ask him about that to know exactly what that was. But no, there's no question. I mean, he had only scratched the surface, and I hate that he obviously transferred. Once Coach Cronin left.
The stat they just threw up a second ago was just amazing. That at this point in the game, you guys had taken 18 more shots than they did, than they had, and you guys ended up with 16 offensive rebounds for the game, which is not. That's not the script, when you go play an ACC team. You hope you can you're hoping they don't get 16 as much as, you can get a couple just to kind of hang on there. But you guys really controlled the glass against their superior size from top to bottom.
And it's also the tough part, too, because, it's like, man, we've got 18 more shots. We've got that many offensive rebounds. And then here, North Carolina is still up 1.
Yeah.
So obviously a great stat. And probably if you tell – the coaching staff before the game that, hey, when there's 11 minutes to go, this is what we're going to be looking like. I'm saying that they're taking that in a heartbeat, because they're going to say, hey, we may be up double figures at that point if that's the case, and then obviously now looks like, Trey's going to pick it up offensively. We're back in a 2-3 zone. So, we're in a great spot. I mean, you couldn't ask for more of a, good, better spot to be in than where we're at here. Just get a steal. I mean, you're getting down to single digit minute wise. We're kind of starting to find our flow, find our tempo. Trey's feeling it a little bit. You haven't really seen them have any transition opportunities really in this second half, which has been really good for our team.
Just and it's funny looking back, obviously 15 years ago, that in my head that this was really the coming out party for Pearson, for Trey, nationally, obviously. I mean, you're obviously on the big stage, but it's like he only had 18 points. But it felt like every one of those 18 was just gigantic, and especially just hit some huge shots here in the second half. But it's like if you'd have told me he scored 30, I'd have been like, yeah, because he was all over the place.
Well, I think Trey's offense was always very timely, and it came in possessions where, it could look like we had nothing, and he would make something of nothing. And so I think that's why, to your point there, because I agree with you, and I think that it just felt like he would have more than it would because every score that he would have would just be so spectacular, and it would come at a time that was so valuable. And so there's been so many situations here where we've gotten him in one-on-one situations just to kind of do what he does best. And, I'm saying there was not many people in the country that year that when you're on an island with him one-on-one with no help, I'm saying more times than not, he's gonna get a score out of that. And so that's what he was so good at. And so I think that's why probably it felt sometimes more than what his point total actually was.
You got Hansborough out of the game. You're up 4. You got 9 minutes left, and again, to your point about lack of experience on their side, and it's like they got to start. This is the moment in the arena. It's like the arena hasn't necessarily come all the way around, but you start feeling the air change. That it's like everybody that's not wearing blue and gold or wearing the Carolina blue, they're like, oh, well, I'm glad we stuck around here because we might get to see another one. And that's when the favorites things start getting tight for them.
Well, this is all, yeah, you're right. And this is also when kind of like, all your neutral fans, they start becoming Murray fans. And so this almost turns into somewhat of a home game for the quote unquote underdog, because, now all these fans, they want to see the upset. And so I do think, to your point as well, this also is kind of where, the team that's the higher seed, they can get a little bit tight now. And so the roles can somewhat reverse because now the confidence level for us here as a 14 seed, it's through the roof. And, we're even more so to the point now we're like, look, we are winning this game no matter what. One of our best players is not even out here, and we've got a 3-point lead with 8 minutes to go. And so it can be a total reversal of emotion, of confidence level at this moment. I think that's kind of what you've seen over these last couple minutes. And obviously Carolina is going to have to do something, which, as I'm saying here, they go to a 1-3-1 to change that momentum a little bit.
And as they threw his stats up there, that Trey was done scoring. And that was probably part of the reason why he felt like he had scored so many points kind of right in a row. And then they didn't, he missed his last 4 shots in the last 9 minutes, which, of course, we'll get to the one big one at the end, which would have changed a lot of people's lives if that one goes in. But
for sure.
Yeah, this is that tough, because this is still the time when, we've kind of gotten spoiled with Murray over this whole decade of their trips. That the game against Vanderbilt, they were a 13, and that was the worst seed they've been since. It's like now they're getting the 12s and obviously the crazy year with the 6 and whatever. But it's like, you're a 14, you're not expected to win. You're in the happy to be there standpoint, and they were playing anything. You guys were anything but happy to be there right now.
For sure. I always think that kind of that 14 is like that line that, where it's going to be really hard. If you can get to a 13 or 12, you're still going to play, obviously, a really, really good team, a top 25 team. But, you look at UNC, they're basically a top 10 team in the country right here. That's just going to be hard to overcome. I do think we were a little bit more of the, not just happy to be there because of our experience. We had a lot of confident guys, but it's hard. You're going to go in, so much of this is all about matchups, and, you've got to go into it expecting to win. I think, Murray's a program that, that they are to the point where, they shouldn't just expect to go, hope that they can win. They should be able to go toe-to-toe with these guys. And that's kind of what we thought that year. Is like, look, our program is right up there with all these guys. And no matter who we play, I don't care if it's Duke, Carolina, Kentucky, we should be able to go toe-to-toe with them. And, then you add in our confidence and our experience level, there was no reason why we couldn't go in and accomplish that. But credit to obviously Carolina here. I mean, going to the 1-3-1 has obviously changed kind of the tempo of the game. And, when you go to a funky defense like that out of nowhere, it can do that at times. You've seen, and emotion and momentum and all that is a crazy thing in sports. So them just going to that to 2 or 3 possessions, change this game. We go up 3 to down 3, and now they go back to man. And it just kind of messes with you offensively. It messes with your tempo, and it messes with your ability to execute. So, a lot of credit there to Coach Williams for doing so.
On top of the fact that you had Pearson on the bench, and then it was, the offense was just kind of, because he was running things at that point. And so, yeah, that it just kind of compounded that for that 3-4 trips.
Absolutely.
It's just, you're just sick watching this, just how many open threes you guys had that, it's like, man, if you make a quarter of them, you win by 10, just so many open shots that just rimmed out. And yet,
and you saw Darnell's had 2. Hopkins has had 2. He obviously makes that one. He missed the one at the other slot a little bit ago, and then the corner 3. I mean, you couldn't ask for better looks, coming down the stretch here.
My biggest memory of Darnell Hopkins is at Bridgestone after you guys. It was Samford, right? You beat Samford in the championship, and you had hit a bunch of threes in the second half to get you guys to the finish line, and I just remember asking him about you, and he was just like, I love that little dude. He was so happy at that point. But he was a guy, he's like, I don't think, he's only there a couple years, sort of a short timer. And I don't know that a lot of folks, sort of just remember him really as much as anything. But he was a heck of a shooter, and unfortunately in this game he'd probably tell you one of his worst games at 2 for 10. But what can you tell us about Darnell?
One of those guys that just totally undervalued. I mean, he brought it every day. He was such a good leader. He was a winner. He had a winner's mentality. That's all he wanted to do. It's all he cared about. One of the things I remember most about him is that he just brought it every day in practice. I can't remember a day that felt like, he had just kind of showed up to practice. And as a result, because I obviously was the same position as him, it forced me to bring it every day in practice as well, because I knew I was going against a guy that was going to, whoop my tail, Yeah. And the other thing I remember about Darnell is he was kind of the first guy that somewhat took me under his wing. I remember when I got there as a freshman in the summer, it might have been maybe the second or third night I was there. He had texted me to come to the gym, and we shot on the gun for forever, just him and I. So, right away, I think that shows you the type of person he was and how big his heart was, and that he cared, about a young guy that was kind of trying to make his way, and wanted me to feel very included, and just the leadership that he showed, about the work that he put in. He really cared about the work, and he put it in. And it's the reason why he had such a good senior year, because there was no substitute for hard work with him. So I still keep up with him to this day, and he's one of the best, no question.
The last couple trips down, Chuck Johnson's gotten nailed for a couple fouls where he's put Hansbrough on his butt a couple of times, and it just feels like that. Now you guys are 35 minutes into this thing that, here's this big bull for the other, for the almighty North Carolina, but Chuck wasn't afraid to drop them if need be, just like you guys were not sweating these guys at all anymore.
Yeah. Chuck was definitely the enforcer. He came in, rough up some guys, wasn't afraid to throw his body around and be physical. And, I remember us kind of joking with Chuck after this game, because, we didn't really talk about it at the first part of the game. But when he was subbed in early in the game, and he came in and he was looking for his offense. He was ready to get up some jumpers. I think he might have even shot one off the side of the backboard from the short corner at one point. But he was just so juiced up and ready to play and ready to compete against him. I think he was tired of hearing the whole Tyler Hansbrough talk, and he wanted to make sure that he came in. And obviously being a senior, he wanted this more than anybody. And, one of my favorite players ever. I mean, he was the comedian of the team, and definitely wasn't afraid to play the role that was asked of him to play. Definitely had no ego, just came in and did his job and did what he was asked to do. And you have to have guys on successful teams that embody that type of role and that are okay with that type of role.
Yeah.
So you can see, Keith missed a free throw. Darnell's missed a free throw. We've, missed a easy Bonnie. It's hard to watch. This being my first time to see it again. I'm sitting here watching it, from a coach's perspective now, and just so many empty possessions, and giving Danny Green the open look on the America's play action a little bit ago, and missing him in transition. Turnover that led to 2 points for them. My goodness, it's hard to watch.
You were 8 for 12 from the line. In the end, it's like, it's not terrible, but in the end, their physicality, I think, and a lot of it was Hansbrough, because he got to the line 10 times himself, but they just, they took 25 and you guys took 12, and in the end, that was pretty much the difference.
And you feel like, with all the offensive rebounds and not converting those, you almost feel like you need to convert every free throw. You feel like you need to go 12 for 12.
Yep.
To somewhat, kind of stop some of this, bleeding that's going on here. Because, we go up, this is a big swing here. There's the front end of a 1-and-1 that we miss. Obviously, we get it back, but not sure if we convert on this possession. But those free throws and those moments, they feel bigger than they really are. You kind of get to the point where you feel like you have to make the free throw versus just shooting the free throw and letting it be natural.
Right.
And when you get into that type of thought process, whether that's a perimeter shot or a free throw or whatever, it's a tough place to be mentally, and you never want to be there. You always want to trust the work and, shoot to shoot and be confident, and then kind of let the rest of it take care of itself. Obviously, we converted, missing the end, front end of that 1-and-1. So that was, a big possession there, a big offensive rebound by Ossian.
He had a great game. You guys only had 3 guys in double figures, and he was one of them, and just sort of runs like a gazelle, just kind of unorthodox, but it was like he was so long, and you saw it a bunch of times in this game, just the long strides, the long, just kind of get to places you wouldn't expect him to, and was really good in this game.
Well, length changes games, it's so big, in terms of, recruiting and things like that. And that's what he was. His arms were, it might have touched his knees. He had that type of length. I think Ossian was maybe, 6'7", but I bet he had a 6'11", 7-foot wingspan. So you talk about what we talked about earlier with deflections. He was one of the best we had at it. He was another one of those guys that was, kind of undervalued. Wasn't gonna, put up 20 points a game, but he brought it every day. He was so good defensively. Gosh, another missed free throw there.
I think you missed 4 in the game, and I swear they've all been in the last 2 minutes.
I know, and those are tough. It just depletes you. It does something to you emotionally. Obviously, it looks like he probably makes this one to make us 8 for 12, what you were talking about. But also, it was another guy, another senior that wanted to take that step. And make a run here because, I still say to this day, we get by this game. I'm not saying that we beat George Mason, but it's a what if. It's a you never know. Yep. Obviously they make the run to the Final Four. It's like, why couldn't that have been us? We had a similar makeup in terms of our build of a team that George Mason had. So I still to this day, get a little frustrated and play the what if game with, if we could have gotten past this game, because obviously George Mason handled North Carolina, in the next round.
Did you guys play a lot of zone during the year, or was that just something that Mick just felt it was best in this situation?
If I remember right, we just kind of used it as, just to change the tempo or change an offensive rhythm. Because, I know that we did it, like I said, in that Jacksonville State game in the semifinals. We played it against Samford quite a bit to obviously break their Princeton type style. And then here, North Carolina had a couple possessions where they had gotten deep post touches to Hansbrough. And so I think it's more so just to kind of change the flow of their rhythm more than it is, a staple of what we do. And then a lot of times, coaches, if it works a possession or two, they're going to go back to it until it doesn't work. And so I think you'll probably see us stay in this until they get a score out of it.
And there you go.
That's a bad result right there. I mean,
you're just like,
we go from, it's 1 point game with Trey with a high ball screen, and we go back to zone right there, and then they get the corner three when they overloaded the zone.
Just like, of all people, Trey gets his pocket picked by Hansbrough at the top too. You're just like,
and I remember that the exact situation cost us the Cincinnati game earlier in the year right there.
Yep.
We had Trey with the ball at the top of the key, and the really athletic kid that ended up playing in the NBA, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he went down and dunked, and it basically it ended that game for us, where we would have won that game. So just two unfortunate situations there. I mean, I'd want Trey with that ball 10 out of 10 times in both of those games.
Yep. Got the layup from Ossian to get it, and it's like, here we go. I mean, this is kind of all you, especially now, at this point in time with the history of everything, and it's like, gosh, all the times Murray been so close and lost by 2, lost by 3, take Michigan State to overtime, and you're like, here we go, down 2, 90 seconds left with the ball. It's like, this is all you could have asked for.
Where you want to be. I mean, again, kind of like I spoke about earlier about the offensive rebounds, but when there was 11 minutes to go, would you have liked to have been there? I think Coach Cronin and the entire staff said, hey, a minute and a half to go, down 2, would you take it right now? And, I'm saying they're taking it 10 out of 10 times, and this all comes down to execution now. Can we execute? Can we convert? Can we make the play that needs to be made?
And there's the big one. Darnell. It's kind of like, who do you want taking the shot at that point? When you're looking at it, it's like you feel pretty comfortable with a lot of guys taking the shot on the floor right now.
No question. I mean, I think, the two that come to my mind right away is Darnell and Trey, Obviously, I would have been fine with Justin as well, but Darnell and Trey, I mean, they've been there, they've done that, they've made big shots. Like I was talking about earlier, Darnell's hard work. I mean, he was ready for that moment. He had already practiced for that moment, so that moment was not too big for him.
And it's dude was 1 for 8 at that point, I think too. I mean, that's some stones in that moment to be like to have the confidence to pull the trigger.
For sure, absolutely. We go back to the 2-3 zone here, needing to stop desperately. You can't give up an offensive rebound in this situation.
This is just such a tough shot. I mean, it's just kind of gather and up over the big fella, and it's like you tip your hat to him.
Yeah, that's just a player making a play. It's there's nothing you can do about that. Forcing them to a tough shot off the block, didn't allow him to get where he wanted to go. And it's frustrating, but it's why you got to have good players in this business. Because they've got to be able to do things like that. No play's ever going to set that up.
Here we go. Do you remember, was there a conversation? Are we playing for the win? Are we playing for the tie? What was just take the best available?
I don't remember exactly. I remember wanting to get the ball into Trey's hands at the top of the key and kind of let him create. And, I mean, there's not many. I'm living with that shot. I mean, that's, It's no different than the other end, you know. I would say that Hansbrough had to make a tougher shot than Trey did right there. It's just, on one end it went in and the other end it didn't. And you've always heard it's a make or miss, sport, and it just is. I mean, it was a great possession. The ball moved side to side. It touched multiple hands. It didn't stick at all, and it ended up in your best scorer's hands for an open look. So that's all you can ask for as a coach.
Oh,
that's hard. That's hard. That's hard to see right there.
Well, I guess it didn't help you any, but 4 years later they got the shot. They kind of
no doubt
monkey off the back. So
absolutely.
Well, as we wind down here in the final seconds, what's your takeaway from the year and sort of your opportunity, your one shot to be able to play in this tournament? In
terms of this year?
Yeah, in 06.
Yeah, I just remember it being just kind of, the cherry on top for our team. I mean, we had such a good run that year. We had such a good team. So if we would have, if we would not have made it to the NCAA tournament that year, it would have totally felt like a failure for that year. I mean, we had experience, we had talent, we had everything that you could ask for in a team. And so, I would do anything to go back and obviously change some of these possessions and some of those possessions to end up a little bit differently. But that year was a great year. It was me as a freshman, I couldn't have asked for more in terms of being able to play in an NCAA tournament as a freshman with a bunch of my best friends and enjoying time with them. So even though it ends, with a little bit of bad taste in your mouth, it's, didn't change anything in terms of how great the year was and how much I enjoyed my first year in Murray.
Tyler Holloway, Murray State, racer great. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it a lot, man. Thanks for having me on.